This week on Quality Digest Live, we examine the advantages of the tree structure Fmea.
That's right, plus a big hurdle for do-gooders. That and more when we come back.
Back to Quality Digest Live for September 1st, 2017. My cousin is 97 today, actually, Dirk.
97?
Yes, cousin Betty. Happy birthday, cousin Betty. Yeah. She's out there listening.
Sure,
I'm sure
she's watching.
That's right. Yeah, 1920, September 1st, 1920. There you go. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest editor-in-chief, Dirk Ducharme. What does it mean that we're seeing so many notable stores like Sears and Kmart and Macy's and JCPenney's, Barnes & Noble, Abercrombie & Fitch, Payless Shoes, and dozens more iconic brands closing stores across the nation. I mean, we're talking, I did kind of a rough thumbnail addition to it. There's maybe 2,000 store closures of name brand stores that you would recognize, and that means also thousands of job losses,
thousands, 100,000,
across the nation, right?
A lot,
and so the question comes: Is this a retail apocalypse? The end of retail as we know it? Well, it kind of seems that way, but according to Brian Andrus, president of the Florida Gulf Coast Commercial Association of Realtors, the answer is, well, no. Now, obviously, he's a retail real estate person, so he's got a slight bias in this. He's trying to spin it the positive way, but he makes a good argument. In his story, there is no retail apocalypse. Andrus says that retail itself is alive and well, and what's happening to retail is not extinction, but simply change. And he points out that U.S. retail sales has a long-term average annualized growth rate of a little over 4%, which is significantly higher than the GDP, which is running
2.73%.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's pretty good.
Yeah, so it's doing better than GDP. So there are a few things which lead people to believe that maybe brick and mortar retail is dying. And for one, you hear, as we said at the top of the story, the closures of these big name stores, and we think, the sky is falling. But according to Forbes, while many of these brands are having problems and closing stores, mostly due to maybe not keeping up with the times, honestly, many others are growing. I mean, Forbes mentions, Dollar General, AutoZone, Ulta, Kroger, TJ Maxx. They've been opening up new stores all over the country. And the retailers that are growing and flourishing, says Forbes, have made investments in guess what? Knowing their local public better, or pivoting to the changes in their local public, as well as investments in both technology and people, which is interesting. If you think about it, these big chains are now changing their gears to think local. How are we meeting our local customers?
There's another thing. I mean, the chains you mentioned, all of those are generally speaking are in the the cheap sector of the market. I mean, they're the less expensive. I mean,
Macy's wasn't exactly cheap, but
no. But I'm saying the ones you just mentioned.
Those guys, Kroger, TJ,
TJ Maxx, Dollar General. I mean, those are ones that serve, the price points of the average transactions are lower in those
much
stores.
Lower,
So that's part of it too.
Yeah, and by the way, it dawned on me as I was reading about this is really almost exactly what happened to the publishing industry, right? I mean, those that didn't change from a strictly print model to one that encompassed, the internet. If they didn't do it at all, or they did it too late, they died off, right?
Did, yes.
And I think we're seeing some of that with the store retail as well. So another thing that skewed our perception of retail industry was, interestingly enough, how the Bureau of Labor Statistics looks at retail jobs. So according to Andrus, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics counts as retail workers only those people who actually work in stores, brick and mortar stores. Right. So the vast majority of the jobs being lost in the retail industry are in-store workers, yet Amazon has recently announced plans to hire 50,000 workers and has recently held job fairs in 4 cities. So the fact that these people will work in a different capacity means they won't get counted because they're not in brick and mortar stores. So the overall feel is that, we've lost retail. Well, really, it's kind of shifted more over to,
yeah.
of course, Amazon is online, so I'm not sure how good a picture that paints. But anyway, none of these employees, as well as workers at rapidly growing tech centers such as Macy's.com, okay, are going to be counted as retail employees. So there is that. And although many brick and mortar stores are closing, it is not really the retail apocalypse. By the way, we do see an interesting shift coming. We see e-tailers themselves showing an interest in brick and mortar. I mean, we just saw Amazon buy Whole Foods, right? So even traditional e-tailers still see value in brick and mortar because there's that personal contact. There's some products that you just don't want to order online.
Sure,
Food.
Yeah, exactly. And you want to diversify. I mean, if you're in Amazon, you want to diversify, and a Whole Foods makes a lot of sense as a model to diversify what you're doing, so you're not just in online. It's a good move. And it's interesting. That's an industry we watch pretty closely, and we'll continue to keep an eye on it. All right, thanks, Dark. All right, well, of course, the major news story in the United States this week is the ongoing disaster in southeastern Texas. Hurricane Harvey made landfall last weekend, and it then stalled in the Houston area, kind of went up then into Louisiana and a little further north, and then has kind of circled back. And it's just been a nightmare. I mean, dumped rain and counted in feet. Whereas normally you'd see the inches of rain, it's feet of rain. It's just been
something like 70 inches, 80 inches,
gosh,
which is like 6 feet of rain,
several
7
feet of rain.
It's
ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I wrote a short op-ed on Harvey that appeared yesterday in the Thursday SIFT issue of Quality Digest newsletter. In that piece, I looked at a couple of topics that I think are worthy of consideration in the immediate aftermath of the storm, namely supply relations and risk management. And when supply relations, they're actually kind of very intricately linked, these two. But in supply relations, I was kind of looking at, a couple of things. One, do you have other sources of supply so that you don't, if an area like Houston gets hit and goes down, you have other ways of getting the stuff you need. We saw that in Fukushima when people in the electronics industry didn't have that. It also ties into risk management. But the idea as well that you want to help your suppliers, you want to help your partners in that area, be a good partner to your suppliers. Maybe there's things you can do. Maybe you can extend some terms, maybe you can let them shuffle things around. We've done that with some of our advertisers in the area, where we said to people, hey, if you need a little more time to get your ad mats together, or if we can help you with their ad mats, let us know, we'll help you out. So be a good partner, that's one thing. And then the risk management part of this as well. I mean, we talk about risk management a lot all the time on the show, and Quality Digest newsletter. I mean, there were a couple of articles that I linked to from Newsweek and from The Atlantic that talked about the planning and the zoning of Houston. And the way Houston is, there's a term called, oh God, I can't, I was going to jot it down and I forgot.
500-year flood?
No, the term impenetrable.
Oh, impermeable surfaces.
And that was that.
Water doesn't go in.
Concrete, macadam, those types of things. And there's a lot of cover like that in Houston. If you've ever been to Houston, and I have a few times, I mean, it's basically a parking lot. I mean, it's just paved over, and there's nowhere for that water really to go to sink in. So the city was not planned. Well, who plans for 500 foot? I mean, it's only a 0.2 of 1% chance that's going to happen in any given year, but still, it does happen. So that's part of the story too. And risk management, of course, to if you're a supplier, you have suppliers in that area to work around that. There's a lot here. I mean, I don't want to take a lot of time on this show because we're going to talk about it in the future as well. It's going to be an ongoing issue in that area for a long time. And I don't want to have recriminations and blame anybody yet, because we're really still trying to clean up, and it's not the time to do that. But the first thing is, I think we can't let the story pass without urging all of you that are listening now, please donate. I think it's really important. I included some really good charitable organizations that are helping. You can also text Harvey, Harvey, to 90999, or again, check out my article. There's a lot of links there for companies that will be good stewards of your donations if you choose to do that. I've done that. I think it's a good thing to do.
And you said, if you're a company that is dealing with clients in the Houston area, you got to think of some way to work with them during this time as they come back up to speed.
It's going to be a long-term thing. So be prepared to dig in and help out as much as you can.
Well, within the last year or so, maybe a couple of years, maybe, we have been hearing a lot about Fmea. I mean, Fmea has been around for forever. We're talking about failure modes and effects analysis, but we're seem to be hearing about it a lot more than we used to. And I think, to me, in a way, this is probably most likely because of the risk-based thinking component of ISO 9001:2015. And Fmea is a good tool for taking a step-by-step approach to identify all the possible failures in a design or a process or a product or a service, which is what risk-based thinking is about, or risk management is about. It's about identifying possible failure points and addressing them. So I think that's probably why we keep hearing about FMEA and similar tools. Now, there's a lot of ways to do FMEA and to visualize it. I'm not an expert on this at all. The way I have seen it done in the past when I've seen FMEA is with something like a spreadsheet. It's a table that lists the risks down the side, and then across the top in the columns you've got your effects, maybe your severity, mitigation steps, that sort of thing. Those go across the top. So kind of pretty straightforward. It's a table. But there is a different way to visualize FMEA, and here to share that method with us is Chuck Boots, Technical Pre-Sales Consultant for Siemens PLM. Hi, Chuck.
Hi, Mike and Dirk. How's it going today?
Oh, pretty good. Okay, so as I said, I'm not an expert on FMEA, so just to kind of set the tone, can you just kind of really briefly give a description of what FMEA is really? I mean, just kind of briefly describe what we're talking about here.
Yeah, like you said, it's failure modes and effects analysis, and it's a tool used to identify all potential failures and their effects on their product and or processes, depending. There is design FMEAs and process FMEAs. Once you identify them, then you can put controls in. It uses a rating system based on severity, occurrence, and detection, and then it comes out with a RPN, or risk priority number, and from there you determine your high levels, which ones need either a redesign, more controls put in. So that's the basic concept behind an FMEA. It really looks from the beginning, cradle to grave is what I call it. From design all the way to your customer has it in their hand. You've identified all possible defects and failures, and you've put controls in to mitigate those risks.
So it's a way kind of prioritizing what your risks are, so to address first, that sort of thing?
Yeah, and I've done them in the past where you start out as, if you've got suppliers, does the supplier have the address to your building? So if he doesn't have the address, he doesn't show up with your product, you can't make it. So the chances of that happening is very slim, but you've identified it and you can mitigate that risk.
So Chuck, Dirk mentioned this in his intro, and I agree with him. I mean, mostly when we've seen FMEAs, we've seen it in a spreadsheet or kind of a table of some sort. But Siemens uses something called a tree structure FMEA. So maybe you can describe a little bit what that is.
Yeah, and I'm in the same boat as you guys. I'm no spring chicken. I've done many Excel spreadsheets of FMEAs. The software here does use a tree structure. It's just like it sounds. If you thought of if you look at a family tree, you've got something at the top and it spreads out on the way down. Same structure here. You put a system element up top, run your operations down, and you run your requirements.
Yeah, I think we even have a slide that we can put up. Yeah.
If you have it, you can throw that up. It gives you an idea. I don't know how well you can see that, but on the left, upper left corner is actually the tree structure.
And
you'll see on the right-hand side is in the form. So at the end of the day, AIAG calls out as well as VDA calls out. It has to be in this form. You build it in the tree, and then it gives you the opportunity to drag and drop. It makes you can look at it very quickly, see the parent-child relationship between everything. But when you're all said and done, you've built that tree, you can put it into a VDA form. And our current software right now has a it's version 3 and version 4, 19649. So it's just a click of a button. It's a lot easier than the old Excel spreadsheets.
And what are some of the advantages of a tree structured FMEA?
Well, one, like I said, I already said, actually, got jumped ahead of myself. But if you look at the tree structure, you can see everything quickly. It's right there, and it goes up and down. Whereas in the old Excel spreadsheets, you're scrolling across from left to right, up and down. And then also in the tree structure, you can see the parent-child very easy. You can use drag drop. So if you want to drag an effect up to a cause, you can do it very quickly. A lot easier than doing it in the old form spreadsheets.
And this is an electronic thing, obviously. I mean, does it is it standalone, or does it tie into other electronic processes, electronic documentation that a company might use?
Yeah, so actually another beauty of this, and I've been caught on this many a times in audits, you update your FMEA, but it's manually dependent to go update the control plan or the process flow or an associated inspection plan. Where in this, you can connect everything, it's all linked. So if I make a change to the control plan, it automatically, if I've got the set right, it automatically update all my FMEA, process flow, inspection plan, any document that's linked to it inside the system. It either asks you if you want to update it, or it'll update it automatically for you. So that's a common thing that happens, is you'll have these spreadsheets and they're great. The thing is, I look at a spreadsheet as kind of a static document. If it just sits there, you create it, a lot of work goes into it, but it just sits there. In the system, it's now a living document. So any update to it goes out and touches everything else and updates it for you.
Okay, so this could tie into your document control system for for procedures, for test procedures, that sort of thing as well, or am I getting a little bit too granular?
Nope. No, that's right. It'll go out to your inspection planning. If you have an inspection plan set up to it, all your change management process, everything is tied in together. And if you set it out for a global company, you can actually build an FMEA at a corporate level. And if one plant updates it and it's a nice process and it makes things better, they can push it back up to the corporate. Corporate can look at it and say, hey, this could fit at all of our other facilities, and push it down. So the guy in China knows what the guy in Utah is doing. And if I'm not say eliminate, but you can minimize the risk of the same failure happening in both plants at two different times, because you've spread that information quickly. It's not just an email that might or might not get read. It's an actual action item that someone has to respond to.
That was going to be my next question. So this isn't just the tree structure. I mean, there's notifications and so forth, responsibilities that can be assigned, that sort of thing.
Yes, it actually will assign it to someone. You can put a date on it. Say, I want a response back in 24 hours. If they don't respond, you can have actually escalate it to their backup, to their supervisor or whatever, and they have to do something. So it'll send out alerts if it's past due. Like I said, if it's an email, someone can say, yeah, I read it, but they get busy and forget to go back and do it. Here, they actually have to sign off and say, I want to accept the change, or no, I don't, and here's the justification for not accepting the change.
Okay. Well, thanks, Chuck. I mean, if our viewers are interested in this topic, we do have a webinar coming up next week titled Advantages of a Tree-Structured FMEA, Agility, Scalability, and Accelerated Quality Feedback, and Chuck is going to be there. The webinar happens on Thursday, September 7th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Chuck will be presenting along with his colleague, Mary McAtee. So keep your eye open for details in your inbox. Also, I believe there is a link underneath the player page that'll take you out to the registration page for that webinar as well. So it's filling up, so be sure to go out and check it out. Chuck, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll talk to you later. We'll see you next week.
See you Thursday. Thanks, Chuck.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Okay, you too.
See you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, thanks, Derek. All right, well, earlier in the show, I chatted a little bit about Hurricane Harvey and the ongoing relief efforts to help the unfortunate folks, of course, that are stuck in the path of the storm. Charitable giving from regular folks like you and me and everyone out there is really the backbone of recovery efforts from all sorts of disasters. It's also the main source of income for organizations that do things like increase literacy and feed hungry kids, get clothes to the needy, and countless other good deeds. However, contrary to the common wisdom, not all of these organizations are nonprofits, and the way in which people tend to support those organizations changes a little bit depending on whether they are for-profit or nonprofit. And that's the key takeaways from the article, A Big Hurdle Do Good Companies Face, by three educators, Saram Lee of the University of Texas, San Antonio, and Karen Winterick and Lisa Bolton of the University of Pennsylvania. All three of these professors specialize in marketing and are consumer psychologists. The article that we just talked about ran in Tuesday's issue of the Quality Digest newsletter. Known as for-profit social ventures, for-profit social enterprises, or public benefit corporations, organizations that both do good and seek to make money while they're doing that, are a lot more prevalent today than they were just like a decade or two ago. They really started to kind of come into their own. But as the title of the article would suggest, and it's kind of a logical conclusion, I think, I thought about that as I read the article, many people have something of a block against donating to for-profit companies. I mean, there's a sense that those running such organizations, they're in it for the money alone, and that they'll be interested in claiming as much of that donated money as possible for their own uses. I mean, maybe it's for extra salary, or maybe it's to buy a car, or lease cars in the company, who knows? I mean, the average person will say, well, you know, maybe I don't trust them as much as a nonprofit. And this opinion, which is true, or maybe it's not true, is backed up by studies that the authors of this piece have conducted themselves and which appeared in the Journal of Consumer Research. Excuse me. In one study, they asked participants to donate money to a pair of organizations promoting literacy. One was a nonprofit and the other was a for-profit. And people gave 40% less to the for-profit organization. And in another study, when given the choice between donating to a nonprofit or a for-profit organization, nearly 2 out of 3 chose the nonprofit. So there's a significant difference here in terms of what people support or don't support. And of course, you know, there's websites such as Charity Navigator, which I just visited. I just visited Charity Navigator.
Now, do for-profits show up on there?
I think they do, yes. Okay. So Charity Navigator does a really good job of kind of sussing out where the money actually goes that you give to any particular charity. And as it happens, actually, many for-profit charitable organizations actually do a better than average job of getting donated funds into the hands of people that need them. Interesting. And the moral of the story is that very often perception is reality. And when it comes to supporting for-profit organizations that are trying to do some good in the world, that reality is actually a pretty high hurdle to overcome. I mean, they're trying to do good things. They got in there for that reason. A lot of people could start any kind of company that they wanted to, but they chose to start a company that, will make some money, but will also do good. I mean, the idea is that they can have the profits from that, hire good, maybe even better people than the nonprofits can, do better work to get the money in the hands of the people that really need it.
Yeah, you mentioned Charity Navigator. I've used that before to look up stuff. Really good website. I think there's another one as well, but I think
I just use Charity Navigator myself to figure out how I want to donate to Harvey.
Right, okay.
I mean, so it's,
and it tells you the percentage, you know, they rank them by the percentage of
funds that actually go to people that use it,
as opposed to
administrative.
But I didn't know that because nonprofits have to be pretty transparent.
Yes.
For-profits,
well, they have to be if they want to play in that space. If they want to be able to show people through Charity Navigator that they're a reputable company, they have to be transparent too. And they are. And that's the thing, is that they're much more transparent, and it's much easier to find out where your money goes than many people would think. So it's consideration. So check that one out. All right. We're going to move on now to our tech corner. We got a good one for you. It's from the people at Teledyne Dallas. It's the BOA Spot, which is a vision system. And Dirk's going to take a look at it now. So Dirk, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Okay, so like Mike said, we have the BOA Spot vision sensor from Teledyne DALSA, and I'll get into it a little bit, just one second, both the hardware and the software. But first of all, it's worth describing what a vision sensor is for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with them. It looks like a camera. It is actually. And these are typically used on high-speed lines, let's say packaging lines. So for instance, you've got a bottling plant, and it's got 1,000 bottles a minute running down this high-speed conveyor, and you need to check whether the bottle caps are on the bottles properly, right? You want to make sure they're on and that they're on correctly, they're not skewed. So the way that might work is you have these bottles spinning down this line, 1,000 bottles a minute. As soon as a bottle comes in front of the camera, it triggers the camera, something triggers the camera, it takes a picture of the bottle and the bottle top and the cap, and then inside the camera, that image is compared to a known good image, known good parameters, and so forth, and a decision is made in the camera itself, in the sensor itself, whether this bottle passed or failed. And if it failed, the camera might send a signal out to a diverter or a gate or a pusher or something to push that bottle off into a reject bin. And this all happens just very quick, if you can imagine, thousands of products a minute running down a line. Now, what makes the BOA spot vision sensor unique is that for a low-cost sensor, it's about $1,000. For a low-cost sensor, it has a lot more functionality than you typically see in a sensor of this type. So in fact, the way Teledyne DALSA positions it, kind of their tagline for it, is a vision system performance at a vision sensor cost. Vision sensor is discrete device. A vision system usually has a lot more components to it. And what they're saying is that this device by itself has a lot of that same functionality as a vision system. So let's take a look at this right now. Is the BOA spot. We can go back to the gauge cam real quick here. No, if you can flick us back. There we go, thank you. So we've got a focus ring on the front right here. Allows it to focus once it's set up. You notice that there's 6 LEDs inside. Those are integrated within the camera itself. This can be ordered with red, green, or blue LEDs. The LEDs are controlled by the camera itself and the programming. Notice we got mounting holes all the way around. So easy to mount this. And then on the back, some status indicators and a couple connectors, one for I/O and one for your LAN connection, your network connection in-house. This is a IP67 rated, so it is good for harsh environments. So typically, what you would do with this is this would normally be used for automated inspection, identification. This camera can do 2D barcodes, regular barcodes, count edges, count features. What else we got here? Optical character recognition, pattern matching, a lot of functionality within a low-cost sensor. Now what I'd like to do is be able to show you how this particular sensor runs. We can't do that because this is a, don't have it hooked up to anything, but we do have emulation software, and if we can switch over to our screen share here, I'll show you what this looks like. So typically, this is the software that you would actually get with this camera. Now, rather than looking at live images, what we're seeing right now are some canned images that are stored within the software, just so I can demonstrate this. And you can see what it looks like we have here is maybe a sheet metal stamped, a small sheet metal stamped parts, got a couple labels on it, a 2D code, some connectors cut out of it, some mounting holes, that sort of thing. And this is coming down the line. You notice it's rotating a little bit. It doesn't have to be, these don't have to be positioned precisely as they're coming down the line. You can take maybe 5 to 10 degrees of rotation, and the BOA spot will still be able to do its job on them. But what I really wanted to show you is how easy it is to program this. So this is basically what you would do programming a part. First of all, you need a known good image. Well, you take your known good image, capture it with the camera, and then you start selecting tools and drawing boxes. So I've selected the barcode tool. I will draw a box around the barcode. Notice down below that it showed me that I've used the barcode tool. It's even read the barcode. I'm going to take the 2D code tool, draw a box around the 2D code. And notice again, once down below, it's read the code. We can see the code says ABC, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to count some slots down there at the bottom, so I'm going to use the edge count tool. There we go, it counts 6 slots. Let's count how many characters are in this label over here. So I'm going to use the count tool, there we go, the count tool, and draw a box around that. Made that box a little too small, so I'm going to embiggen that box a little. Sorry, let me just erase what I did there because I made a mistake. We're going to take this tool. 1 second here as I made a mistake, but that's easy to correct. I just use the correction tools. There we go. I draw my box around my label. And then once I've done it, I can go in and actually right-click on this and edit some of the parameters so I can tell it that I'm looking for a dark character on a light background. I do that, and now it's seeing 8 characters in that box, and that's reflected in the table down here. And finally, let's do some pattern matching. We are going to take a look at this connector cutout up here. And so I draw a box around that. And I also am going to say that this particular feature is a locator, and we're going to locate it for rotation. This is to compensate for rotations of the part. You need to give it a feature that it's going to use to kind of compensate for any rotation of the part as it comes down the line. And that's it. This is fully programmed. I can now run the program. So now we are pretending that we are measuring parts. We see some of them are passing, some of them are failing. So if I stop it and we step back through and look at some of these parts, this is a known good part. There's nothing failed on it. This part is fine. This part gives me a failure, and if I look down here on the bottom, I can see there's a slot missing. And we see a red line there. We see our red dot on the left. It's detected that this was a bad part. And again, I keep stepping through them, and I find a part where there's only 6 letters instead of 8 letters in that label. So once again, it detects it, marks it, flags it. Now this is all we would need to do if we were simply going to do no-go on parts coming down the line. If I wanted to apply more logic to this, I could do that through scripting. I would simply go into my scripting tool, open that up, and now I have a lot of scripting options. I could be taking this information that I've gathered, I could be doing some logic on it, and maybe giving an output to a PLC further down the line, something to do with this part. Or any other types of outputs. The BOA spot does support several PLC communication protocols, so we could easily talk to, let's say, a Rockwell PLC or a Siemens PLC, all very easy. And that's it. Once you're done programming, you simply hit the save button. You would go out, you would save your program, give it a name, and now in the future, when you're ready to work with this particular part, you would simply connect your computer or your laptop to your camera. You would upload this program into it. You could disconnect the computer. The camera would be ready to go to inspect these parts. So that is basically it. That is the BOA Spot low-cost vision sensor that has a lot of capabilities of a vision system. If you want more information on it, there is a link underneath the player page that will take you out to the BOA Spot webpage on the Teledyne DALSA site. There's a lot of specs and more information there you can read on it. Thanks to the folks at Teledyne DALSA for sending this to us for today's Tech Corner. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it. And Mike, back to you.
Thank you, Dirk. Yes, there it is, the BOA Spot ID vision sensor, as we saw from Dirk there. Good job, Dirk, on that Tech Corner, as always.
Thank you.
That was a great job there, man. Very
high-speed lines are fun to watch. Actually, if you ever watched the mechanics of them, it's crazy. You have like absolutely a bottling line. Yeah. You can't even see the bottles moving, but every now and then you'll see a bottle get kicked out. And it's just every now and then, and it's being detected on the fly, and it's using something like this.
Incredible.
It's pretty crazy.
Great stuff there. So thanks for the folks at Teledyne DALSA for providing that to us, and thanks, Dirk, again for doing a great job.
Sure, no sweat.
And thanks as well to Chuck Boots. Chuck Boots was with us today on the show. That is our show for today. Chuck joined us and told us a little bit about the Fmea tree structure FMEA that they have from Siemens. Don't forget, of course, we have a webinar coming up from them for you next week called The Advantages of a Tree Structure FMEA, Agility, Scalability, and Accelerated Quality Feedback. And again, that happens on Thursday, September 7th. Happens at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Chuck Boots of Siemens, who we talked to earlier in the show, is going to be presenting along with his colleague, Mary McAtee of Siemens, and Dirk right here is going to be your host. So make sure you check out your email inbox, or as Dirk mentioned, there's a link right here on our player page, so go and check that out. And register. Should be a really great webinar.
Great.
So thank you all for joining us. Have a great Labor Day weekend. We'll be back. That's right. Woohoo! Get out of the heat if you're here in Northern California. Yeah. And have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you back here on Tuesday for QD, and of course on Friday for QDL.
And think about supporting the folks down
Texas.
there in Texas. Yeah.
Please do. All right, thanks for joining us again. We'll see you soon.
So.